Wild Honey on Georgia Peace label. I and I just kept recording different groups. I got so many groups I recorded. I can't think of it. Gary Davis, I recorded him, Michael Campbell, with High Rosen, and I did Wood, Spoon G. That's how I got started. I had so many groups I recorded at the time.
What made you want to make records catering for disco and DJ? Like also records that seem to be, DJ friendly and dance floor. What made you go in that direction?
Well, I just seen everybody dancing, and it reminded me of it's really, dance is nothing but R&B speeds up, that's all. And everybody could dance. You know, it was really fun. So I figured if I could make something where everybody could dance, I could sell records. So I started cutting up-tempo records. So they came with different names on the disco records. Because all of them was just the phone. It's a different name. You could dance off the tap of hand. And when I met Patrick, he had a good sound, so I incorporated the sound with funk and R&B, and that's what happened. It just jumped up that way there. Everybody started all disco records. It's nothing really different. It's just dance music.
I thought that G stood for budget. I thought that G stood for budgeting. Where is that not true?
You said before I met Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, what does P&P stand for?
Peter and Pat, that's my children's mother. Her name is Patricia Gilliard.
Oh, I see.
So we started P&P Records.
So you have a certain experience that you can tell us dancing to disco that means you want to do more disco with these tunes?
Yeah, we're going to do more disco with tunes. Yeah, we're working on something that we got a new cloud one that we get ready to come out now. So it'll be out by another month.
So I want to ask Patrick, did you have an influence during just records that made you want to make disco? Is Patrick not in the room?
He went to answer the phone for a minute. He'll be right back.
Oh, he's not. So besides, you had the other labels like William Constance, Element Stars, kind of New York, and the hits.
Yeah.
What made you, make all these labels? What was the difference between?
Well, I had so many artists, so I didn't want to put all artists on the same label. I had so many, I had so many artists come to me to record. So I just got some corporations. Like I got a new corporation there called P&P Records I'm going to come out with. I'm going to have a young guy working with me named Clifford. I'm going to get the vice president called Big P, going to do some different type of music. That's my new corporation I'm ready to put out about another month. So I'm going to do movies too.
You made these different labels just because there's a lot of artists?
Yeah, that's right. That's why it's more labels. So I had so many artists coming to me at the time.
So each people was like a different sound, or that they were kind of similar?
They were different sounds, some were similar. But all was mostly where you can dance off, you know?
A lot of the press were really limited on these records. They're really hard to get sometimes. And why do you get press for records?
Well, it's so hard to get.
Yeah.
Well, at the time I was putting out, I might push 500 up, 1,000 up. It comes time to sell, that's all the press. But now everybody wants the record, everybody looking for them, everybody. I'll probably press up some more, because everybody wants them,
So that they have a budget to press a lot of records?
Well, you have to have not such a big budget, but you have a budget period, It's because how many you're going to press 4,000, 2,000, 500. It's because how you feel about it. If you feel it's going to be a big seller, then you press 2,000. If you feel it's going to be a small record, you press 500 or 300. first out when I played with it, I don't never know what it's really gonna do. Like when I look up, it's a hit, you know. Then I can go back and trust a whole lot of it. Like now, everybody looking for my record. Everybody wants my old record. Everybody looking for them. So eventually, I just press one back up.
Some of the records later on really extended this part. Yeah. What do you think of that? What do you think? Like records like Moment My Rainbow by that became such a sought after record, became really expensive to get art. Yeah. What do you think of people searching for your record?
Well, I'm glad they're searching for it. You know, I wish I could help them, but I don't have no one. You know, I got to go back to press. So I'm just thinking. You know, I'm just waiting, but I'm gonna press up some more old stuff. Because everybody looking for it.
You still have the masters to a lot of these old records?
Yeah, I still got access to the tapes and stuff, you know?
So when you and Pat worked together on records, were you guys in the studio together, or were you more on the business side?
No, I can see you a lot. I can see you, man. You right in the studio, man. Most time.
But you would let Patrick have me ring?
I'll let him do what he want to do. You know, man. I have ideas I tell him about, you know?
We were talking about, working across on the records always produced by Patrick Brown. So what was it, better working on these records, or how was it collaborating?
A lot of times, well, let me see. Actually, I would say the majority of the times, Peter will say, let's do this type of record, which would give a direction. And the wonderful thing about the songs that Peter and I do together is that they're very spontaneous.
And it lasts forever.
Yeah. And I actually have a theory about that it's almost like jazz, but we're not just improvising a melody, we're improvising a track. Everything is improvised from top to bottom. If you listen to, I was reading somebody's blog recently, and the fellow was saying, well, Patrick Adams is not such a great keyboard player. Listen to all the mistakes he makes. And I have yet to answer that, because I defy anyone to listen to Jimi Hendrix and tell me that he wasn't just playing sometime with some of the stuff he did. I mean, I love Hendrix. I'm a great Hendrix fan. But I was reading somebody's article and they said Hendrix could bend a note into quarter tones between, and I'm saying, get out of here. The guy was just having fun. He was just having a great fucking time. And that's what P&P Records are about. That we feel if we have fun in the studio making a record, then the listener's gonna have fun, whether he's dancing or doing whatever he's gonna enjoy the record. We try to pass the emotions through the record.
So Peter would give the initial direction, and Patrick would take the reins and kind of.
Yeah, and then while Peter may not ever tell me not to do something, he certainly will guide me toward something sometimes. And say, hey, I like where you're going with that, and then say, well, can you add this or can you add that? And sometimes it's specific and sometimes it's not. It's a partnership.
Was there a certain record that you bring in a club or something that made you want to do more intense music or disco, or an experience you had in the club or something?
I'm going to just say the initials T as in Thomas and B as in boy. In 1974, a young lady whose initials are TB, she and I were just hooking up. And she took me to a gay disco. And that night, I just immersed myself in the music and the whole experience of a disco. I think the record that impressed me the most at that moment was Love to Love You Baby by Donna Summers. Now, what's really funny is that people are always asking me, well, what discos did you hang out at? And the truth of the matter is, I think in my entire life I've only been to 4 discos. I was not a disco maven. I was in the studio all the time making records. I didn't have time to be hanging out and partying like that.
Well, you might have different labels like Wisconsin, Heavenly Star, kind of, or magnetism, kind of really be collectors, but was it just differentiate the sound?
I don't know how Peter will answer that, but I will tell you that dealing with record distributors in the 70s was not easy, and I have other entrepreneurial friends who tell me they would create different label situations to get paid, because sometimes it was just a whole mess,
So on this Cinemix, there's also some early, disco rap, like a class. How did the early rap concept team come about? Like, what do you think when first rap went around, and how was a song like rap made? How was that happen?
Well, rap is, to me, it was just a bunch of young people had lots to say, and they wanted to rap. So I was started recording them.
What do you think of rap, Mr.? Do you think of it as another kind of song, or?
It was just that it just was another language that people, make them feel good, and they want to speak their opinion. So I put it on record for them.
I do have something I want to say about that. Unfortunately, there are some very closed-minded people in this world who, they get stuck in a genre and they will not open up to other types of things. There was a time when people used to call me the Prince of soft soul music because of my work with Black Ivory and the Continental Four and stuff like that. Then I became the uncrowned king of disco when In the Bush and that stuff and the P&P stuff came out. And I decided I got tired of the labels because when I first wanted, I'm glad you asked this question. See, that's one of the reasons I hooked up with Peter, because coming out of my Perception Today experience and having done arrangements for A Spectrum and writing songs for Bloodstone and Main Ingredient, I couldn't get arrested in the disco circles because they said, oh no, he does R&B music. You can't do disco. And so part of me hooking up with Peter was to prove from the outside that I could do disco as well, if not better than anybody else. And then when the rap thing started happening, I will tell you, Marley Marl and I are very close. And in the 80s, while I was working at Power Play Studio, I used to engineer Marley Marl's records, his early records. And then Marley got involved with Warner Brothers, the Cold Chillin' label, that whole thing. And someone in that circle said, "Why are you working with Patrick Adams? He can't produce rap. He's a disco producer." And it was at that point that I made a very interesting decision. I said, okay, I'm not going to put my name on the next couple of things I produce. Now, I'm not here to contradict the credits on anybody's albums. I mean, we all have our opinions about who did what. But I will ask you this, if you listen to Eric B. and Rakim's first 3 albums, do you hear a difference from everything that happened after that? Eric B., let me see, just before that, Salt and Pepper. Herb Azor came to Power Play and he said, do you know how to make music loop? Can you take a piece of music and play it over again? And I helped Herbie Azor do Tramp. And when Tramp started to become a hit, he asked me, would you produce me? Would you, the group, you know, like we don't know, would you manage us? And I was through with managing groups because that's nothing but a headache. And I said, well, you look like you know what you want to do. You just need a little help. So you could say I sort of shadow produced Salt and Pepper's first album, Hot, Cool, and Vicious. But I told Herbie, I said, no, you become the producer, you become the businessman. Because that's another thing, just like Peter, I want to see young black people become business-minded and take control of what they do. So a couple of weeks later, in walks Eric B. And Eric B said, would you produce me and Rakim? And I said, no, but I will help you. And technically, I produced that Paid in Full album. Eric has said in interviews, he described it as, you know, Patrick was the engineer and I would have an idea and Patrick would make it happen. And at some point, someone is going to have to ask Eric, what happened on those nights when you didn't come to the studio or you ran out the studio early? But I'm very proud of that album. I did the final mixes on that album. On Chinese Arithmetic, that's me. It is, and that's all I'll say about that. But the relationship was very good for 3 albums. You know, one go, well actually at this point I guess all 3 are platinum. But then, you know, Eric was expanding, you know, doing Freddie Fox, doing some other productions, and we sort of started going in different directions. But Dana Dane, his album, and it goes on and on. I can list a whole bunch of albums that I technically produced, but I don't want to take credit from anybody. But I did that because I got tired of people's mouths about, oh, he's a disco producer, he can't do, you know, that's like right now. I don't, you know, what am I now? Am I a R&B producer? Am I a disco producer? Am I a rap producer? I don't know. I'm a producer, and I consider myself to be one of the greatest producers that ever produced a record, and that's not ego, that is, I was always told that humility is the truth. So that's the truth from my point of view. I can produce anything.
So things like
Well, as you may have noticed, there is a resurgence of disco in some quarters. I hope there's a resurgence of R&B. Like this situation where you have one or two companies owning all the radio stations in the country, that's ridiculous. New music is not being exposed on the level that it should be. The things that they push out in public as being wonderful and great is not wonderful and great. The whole reality TV thing is messed up because I don't consider, I've seen very few people on TV who I would want to idolize.
Yeah, how much longer do you guys think you're gonna be?
The end.
Okay. Back to the station.
There's Guardian Angels watching over this great trading clubs. People from hip hop and disco love this song. How did this song how did you figure out the instruments behind this song?
Say that one more time?
What's the story behind Guardian Angels watching over? Tell me how about
Good name.
Well, it's funny. Call it serendipity if you want, but the night that we recorded that song, like I said, a lot of times Peter would call me and say, let's go in the studio on such and such a date, tonight, tomorrow, whatever it is. And I don't know what we're doing until we get in the studio. And that night, I happened to run into Curtis Sleever in the subway. So I don't know if that was just a heavenly thing that happened. I didn't say anything to Peter, but the Guardian Angels at that time was a big issue because I think that was around the time that Burnley, I forgot the white boy's name who was in the subway and fighting off kids, whatever. But Peter said to me, what do you think of the idea? And that's usually how it's phrased. Peter will usually say, what do you think of Guardian Angels watching over me? And I said, great. And, then the process begins. I sit down at the piano and try to develop a melodic theme and a chord structure. And who's the girl? The vocalist at the end. I mean, listen, it's just a wonderful creative process where it's all done pretty much in a couple of hours.
Wow. So you're saying on the way to the Guardian Angels in the game?
Oh yeah, they were all over the subway. and it was actually Curtis Sleever who I ran into.
So that song wasn't a plan, it just came about that night.
I had no idea what we were going to do when I got there.
So another well-known record that you worked on was on M.P. Who was she and how did you discover her? How did that
Which one?
the Donna McGee,
Oh, Don McGee.
maybe that's forever. Too.
It's funny. I never knew Don McGee had been in the Fatback Band because Fatback, even though they signed with Perception Records, that was after I left Perception, or around the time I was leaving. So I didn't have a relationship with Bill Curtis. I do respect. I like the Fatback Band's music, and like I said, I didn't know Donna. I didn't meet Donna then. I met Donna through Greg Carmichael, and it was. That was an interesting experience. Donna is an excellent vocalist. Greg asked me to try to develop some songs for her, and that's how that came about. And you know, I later used her on the Freak album. She did "May My Love Be With You."
Not like you discovered.
Excuse me.
It's not like discovered her as a singer.
One of the great joys of my life, and I know Peter talks about it the same way, is discovering talent and giving them a leg up. You know, we're equal opportunity providers. You know, when a talented person is given an opportunity, if they are ready, they will explode. They will just take off from there. And when I look back, when I look at Fawn LeRae, Donna McGee, Jocelyn Brown, and the list goes on of people who I worked with on their first records, it's a wonderful feeling.
Another trademark of the P sound is like that whole cop bass down sounds like super cheap, upbeat. And I want to ask you about this how did that, like how did you guys work together on that one? Like a huge class build.
I mean, it's, you know, look, R&B music has always had certain core elements, you know, and for us, it's always been bass, drums, congas, and then you go from there.
So that sounds pretty much just a jam.
Hey, James Brown made a career out of making jam records. You know, there's a big joke, I don't know if you know it, I forgot the song, but there's a song where James says, D, go to D. He's telling the musicians change to the key of D. They didn't know what the hell was going on. Or when he says, take me to the bridge and drop me off, he is literally telling the musicians, okay, let's go to the bridge section of the song. A matter of fact, some of the records Peter and I made have been that sort of jam where when we have, on the rare occasion that we have used other musicians, and we do every now and then, it's that James Brown mode of, you know, let's jam, let's once again have a good time, let's party. I think she just has been on so many projects. I don't think anybody can take credit for discovering her.